So let's start off with the SEC, man. No surprise. We've got Georgia and Texas up there at the top. Georgia plus 185, Texas plus 300, followed by Ole Miss, Alabama, LSU, and Tennessee there. So you can kind of see that there's the top two, and then there's a little bit of drop off on the second tier. But man, I really legitimately feel like the 6 teams on this page have got a chance. Everybody on this list here has got a chance. Obviously, I feel best about my Georgia Bulldogs. I think the Georgia Bulldogs are in really, really good shape, barring catastrophe or injury or what you can't predict those types of things. But returning a guy like Carson Beck, returning some good wide receivers. Kirby Smart fields a great defense every year, and nobody's recruited better in the country than Georgia. Really, you got Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, Texas, those top tier recruiting teams. And we just talked to Daryl about LSU, and I think there's potential for LSU as well. What do you think about these SEC teams and the odds that have been released?
It's interesting to me that there's no Missouri on this list, right? Tennessee kind of gets the nod ahead of Missouri. That's a little bit surprising to me. And I guess that the idea there is that Nico Iamaleava could actually be him, and could be the guy. And maybe that's why we see Tennessee instead of Missouri. Maybe they have the same odds and they just chose to list Tennessee. I'm not sure. But I thought that Missouri got a little bit snubbed here because I do think that they deserve to be on the list of the top 6 teams in the SEC, if nothing else, right? They don't really have a tough schedule. So, again, I'm just a little bit surprised by that. But looking at this, I mean, look, we know Georgia would be number 1. We knew Texas would be number 2. Interesting to me that Ole Miss is ahead of Alabama. I think it's right. I just didn't expect the odds to show that. But I guess that Vegas knows what they're doing, right? So maybe they think Alabama fans will be bullish about their team, and Alabama has a nice, a big following. Maybe they feel like that the fans will be bullish on their team, put their money on Alabama to win the SEC championship, knowing that they have really a lesser chance than what is advertised. And then LSU, look, just went through that interview with Daryl there on the LSU Tigers. There's a lot to like about the team. Questions on defense, specifically the defensive line, and how well can all the skill players on offense mesh together. I think that they're a very talented team. They will be year in and year out, but there's a lot of turnover this year for the LSU Tigers, and that makes me a little bit apprehensive. When I'm breaking this down, though, you look at the top 2 teams, right? Georgia and Texas this year. What are the differences in the 2 teams, Mark? Because to me, you've got similar type quarterbacks, right? If you're really just kind of taking a broad level view, a similar type of quarterback, both somewhat mobile. They can get out of the pocket if they need to, but they're known for their big arm, big tall frame, nice, pro style quarterback build. I firmly believe that both of these quarterbacks will play in the NFL in some capacity. And when you go out wide, you've got pretty good receivers for Georgia. There's a big stable for Georgia, but unproven, right? Same can be said about Texas, right? Pretty similar. A good group of guys. We're pretty sure, but we haven't seen them all play together. They lost a lot on the perimeters last year, just like Georgia did. And then 2 really good offensive lines and 2 good, maybe not great yet, backfields. Could be great this year. We'll see. But I'm still trying to figure out what's going to happen in the backfield on offense.
I think Georgia has a better chance of having an elite running back, room than Texas does at this point. Do you agree with that?
I agree. Mainly because of the addition of Trevor Etienne. I think he's going to end up being a great running back for Georgia. This is a guy who a lot of fans of college football kind of forgot about because they forgot about Florida, and he came from Florida, had some really good runs behind a crappy offensive line for the past 2 seasons. So I think he's going to come to Georgia, be very successful, and then but moving to the defensive side of the football, I think that's where you're going to see a little bit of a separation between Georgia and Texas. Texas should be better on the secondary. Not as good as Georgia, but they should be better than Texas was last year, right? Middle linebackers are going to be great for both sides. All right, that they're two of the best units in college football at middle linebacker. Like they're both probably top 10
Yeah.
in the middle there. And then up front, it's interesting because Texas was really good up front against the run, right? Elite, like one of the best in the country. They lose a few guys, right? There's going to be some drop off. They just can't go from 1 to 30, right? They need to kind of hover up in the top 20 there on the run defense. And then Georgia's the opposite. For the first time in a long time, they weren't number 1 in the country, right? They took a step back and they were below 20 against the run. And now we got to see if they can make an improvement there against the run. But look, my point is to say these are two really similar teams, right? If you're looking at them position by position, I'm going to give Georgia the slight edge talent wise. Texas can sure as hell beat Georgia, though. Like, let's not fool
Absolutely.
ourselves. Like,
Yeah.
this is going to be Ole Miss can beat Georgia. We're going to get to see them play at least once, right?
Well, this is the type of offense that Georgia historically, even with Kirby Smart, if there has been an offense that Georgia struggled against, it's been this type of offense. It's been you have to have NFL wide receivers and you have to have an NFL quarterback to beat Georgia. You're going to have to win battles one-on-one over the top. That it's mandatory to beat Georgia in a big game. So I completely agree. I think Georgia definitely has the edge defensively. I think both defensive lines have something to prove, and whichever defensive line can perform better this year, I think it could be the difference for either one of these teams winning the SEC championship. Texas obviously lost Byron Murphy and Devondre Sweat from last year. I mean, those are big-time NFL prospects, okay? And you don't just snap your fingers. Those types of guys don't grow on trees. There are recruiting fights, battles that go on year-round, year after year for those types of guys. So which guys that have been recruited to each of these programs are going to step up? That could possibly make the difference for these defenses, I think, because we all know you get a good defensive line, it anchors the whole defense, right? It really does. And getting after the quarterback helps the secondary, right? And being able to hold off blocks on the defensive line helps the linebackers. So it all goes hand in hand, and whichever one can play more complementary is going to end up being more successful this season and possibly winning that SEC championship.